So we welcome now Katherine O'Brien and Patricia Farnan to talk to us about fighting fulfilment units. Katherine has worked at the University of Notre, Australia since 2020. She started her library career as a student library officer in 2016 while studying medieval history. She is responsible for administering Open Athens and Springshare and supports Patricia in administering Ex Libris products. Patricia has worked at University of Notre Dame, Australia since early 2007 and is responsible for administering Alma, Primo VE, Leganto, Rapido and Rialto. She's been on the ANZREG committee as a finance officer since 2022. Patricia and Katherine, thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing your talk.
Thanks, Deborah. Hello, everybody. We are speaking to you from Wajak Noongar Budja. At Notre Dame, we learn and work across Wajak country, Yaru country and Gadigal country. These lands were never ceded. We're just going to start by providing a bit of a backstory for us. We migrated to Alma in mid-2020 from Horizon, Cersei Dynex product. We had been working for years on tidying our data before our migration. Of course, this work really ramped up in the year or so before migration. In preparing for migration, we had to learn a whole new system language. Horizon collections became Alma locations. Horizon locations became Alma libraries. It did take us a while to wrap our brains around it. And we also then had to impart this new information to our non-systems colleagues as well. In addition, a new bib record structure required a redesign of our entire collection. Horizon bibs and items became Alma bibs, holdings and items. Our implementation was also challenged by our unique resource sharing setup. We have multiple NUCs and there was a lack of Ex Libris documentation to assist us in setting up resource sharing because most people use the out-of-the-box resource sharing library, which we don't. After migration, we feel we did pretty well with the migration. For example, we only had one bib that failed to migrate, but we did pretty quickly identify some gaps in our data mapping between the university's PeopleSoft system and Alma. This was a result of some of the challenges we had faced communicating with IT during our implementation year, which was also COVID year one. We ended up relying on complex display logic rules to bridge some of the data gaps that we had found. In mid-2022, Notre Dame's affiliation with the Catholic Institute of Sydney meant that CIS's Veitch library holdings and configuration were ingested into our Alma instance. Early on, we aimed to include CIS in our streamlined configuration. Our most recent adventure in fulfilment has been the result of an extensive refurbishment of the St. Teresa's Library in Fremantle. This refurbishment called for an entirely new to us fulfilment approach. With the refurbishment, our library collection moved from being accessible to all visitors to being mostly enclosed in compactus. This freed up a large space which now houses study rooms, long tables with spaces for mobile devices to plug in, and comfy lounges and chairs and everything. In addition to the compactus and open plan library spaces, we also gained a new high demand room. This room houses a variety of physical items that are accessible to staff and students, such as high use non-teaching items, all course reserves items, and other collections that cannot be taken out of the library. Also in this high demand room are our new self-check machines and a smart returns shelf. Did I mention we're moving to RFID? I don't think so, but that's why we have the smart returns shelf. Because of all these physical changes to our library space, we knew that we needed to make changes to our fulfilment configuration as well. For compactus loans, we needed to start offering on-shelf requesting. For our in-library only items, we would need to set up a reading room circulation desk. We also identified another golden opportunity, which was rethinking how we were enabling inter-campus loans between our West and East Coast campuses. We had been relying on LAD resource sharing and our multiple NUC codes for years, but if Alma could do the work more efficiently, why not consider it? We knew where we wanted to go, but we couldn't start the journey until we knew what dragons we were facing and where we were standing. What configuration did we already have in place and what changes did we need to make? The only way we could answer those questions was to pull our scattered project documentation together from the file server, emails, Teams, Basecamp, notes in Alma configuration tables, etc. In the end, we found ourselves facing off with these dragons. Messy and overly complicated configuration that had only got worse over the last 4 years, lack of clarity around policies and user groups, and our own lack of confidence in interpreting and making changes to fulfilment configuration.
So we needed to decipher why certain rules had been created. We had a brainstorming session with a whiteboard where we outlined the configuration that was currently in place and compared this against what it was intended to do. It was a valuable exercise, but did involve extending our meeting room booking several times. After this, we realized that we needed a document that translated the front-facing team's policies into our system language, and it seemed important to document this outside of Alma. Our usual approach is to try and work within Alma as much as possible and to work from spreadsheets as little as possible, but there was no consistent way to document this information within Alma and keep our configuration tables from becoming overwhelming again. We met with front-facing staff to understand their requirements and developed what we called the fulfilment infrastructure spreadsheet. This spreadsheet included physical locations and their access policies, user groups and user entitlements, such as requests, loans, and a full breakdown of fulfilment units, terms of use, and item policies. So now our hero's quest was clear. We needed to create new fulfilment units for Fremantle locations without affecting the other libraries, implement new naming conventions and descriptions for rules. Previously, we had described the composition of each rule in Alma, and instead we decided to outline what the rule aimed to achieve. We also needed to fix our location types. For some unknown reason, we had these around the wrong way, so closed was open and open was closed. And finally, we needed to configure a reading room for the in-library only locations. So how to approach our quest? Because exported configuration files don't include details about rule parameters, we created yet another document outlining a purpose statement for each and justification for each rule. Our loan rules were mostly fine, but our request rules needed a lot of work. We tried to simplify the structure and we established terminology for item and user entitlement and created new terms of use around this. For example, we decided to group digital resource sharing requests and internal digitization requests together under the term digital requests. We don't currently offer a digitization service for our patrons, but we decided to make all eligible items available for all types of digitization in Alma, but just hide the digitization options from patrons and Primo using display logic rules. We use the term local requests to describe scenarios where items can circulate to patrons on the same campus, but cannot be sent elsewhere, whether that's for resource sharing or to other Notre Dame campuses. We also reviewed Ex Libris documentation to check our understanding. Our biggest discovery was that in request fulfillment unit rules, resource sharing rule conditions only applied to lending requests. In addition, those rules would not be applied if they contained conditions relating to users. That makes sense because we know that borrowing resource sharing is handled in other configuration tables, but this was not clear during our implementation in 2020. Because we use resource sharing for intercampus loans, we had rules to allow borrowing resource sharing for certain types of patrons if the item was available in another campus of Notre Dame, but not their own. So we realized that these rules weren't doing anything at all. So in our main fulfillment units, we've now gone from over 20 request rules to under 10. Late last year, we thought that our main focus of 2025 would be the configuration changes and grand library opening. Alas, almost as soon as the year began, fireballs began to rain down from a fiery dragon guy above. We experienced a cyber incident, which meant a total system outage. We were delayed in implementing RFID and self-check as we were almost ready to begin testing this when the incident occurred. And we found ourselves integrating Open Athens with Okta and bringing all library systems into Open Athens a year earlier than expected due to the cyber incident. Additionally, other projects that appeared in our path included EBSCO New UI, ProVLAD migration, which was another curveball for our intercampus loans, an institutional data mapping initiative, and local file server migration. We now know that we can't always streamline everything. For example, we started out with one kind of course reserves temporary location for all libraries, with a 4-hour loan period. But our library in Broome now has short loans instead because students come to campus once a week. CIS Beach Library needs reloan limits due to their unique collection. Our libraries are different geographically, but also have differing needs for their collections and their patrons. It's important for us to recognize the different contexts for the libraries that we support and how the library's collections and spaces do vary. The standardized approach isn't necessarily the best. So with this in mind, what's next? Well, after today's very thoughtful and relevant keynote, I'm thinking we need to look at this with a different framework. But having said that, we are still focusing on continuous improvement, reviewing our reading room workflow for in-library only items to see if it's worthwhile for our team. We also need to review request priorities and patron limits and document our decisions for all other areas of fulfillment configuration. And perhaps most of all, we need to make sure we maintain our new and fairly rigid configuration procedures and maybe build in an annual audit process. RFID and self-check is nearly complete. And when our printing and scanning services are back online in the next few months, we'll close out our digitization for Leganto project. And when everyone is over the change fatigue, we have our intercampus requesting configuration ready and waiting. And then hopefully we can say we all lived happily ever after the end. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat yet. I do have to say that there were many parts of your presentation that were very relatable. For places that are run by people whose job it is to organise information, libraries do somehow manage to be very chaotic places sometimes, and fulfilment rules are some of the worst. I don't know how it happens, but yeah, very relatable.
Thanks, Deborah. We were thinking similar with your presentation and with Katherine's presentation as well. It seems like we experienced similar dragons obstacles.
Yes.
And I would say, Lorraine, unfortunately, we didn't highlight this in the presentation, but we're not quite through it yet. I do need to go back through and make sure I have documented everything like I've said that I have and like I meant to. Peter, that's an interesting experience. External departments asking you to do special things with certain types of objects to manage. I think that is something that happens to us with other products like Spring Share, but we've managed to not experience that yet with Alma too much. And I think we would definitely recommend doing scheduling a review of your fulfillment units in terms of use. Tricia, I think you said the other day that our manager, Ali, had a statement, a quote from when the implementation started, that it was going to take 5 years.
Yes.
5-year review.
She made sure we kind of had that in mind before migration. And, you know, we thought, yeah, a few years, it's taking a few years, and now it's basically taken 5 years. So, yeah, she was right.
The review is a different process in itself, I guess, but I would definitely recommend, and we're open to hearing advice on how you've documented and how you think that it works well, because I think you can try, but it's often when you see examples from other places that you realise how to improve your own documentation.
Well, thank you again. I'm seeing some comments reiterating how validating your presentation was, but no questions at this point. So I think it may now be time for us to move on to the next presentation. Thank you, Patricia and Katherine. That was fantastic.
Thank you.